Okay, it's another episode of Let's Chat Health Tech, and this time I'm spend a few minutes talking about an idea and an angle that I've been mulling over for a while and have used in the past. Healthcare in the United States is not one large market. Everyone thinks of it as CMS and HIPAA, and there's one standard throughout the country, and it's simply not true. It's 50 different markets, that adds a tremendous amount of confusion and complexity to the already complex healthcare system that I talk about all the time. But it also means that there are 50 different kinds of opportunities and 50 different ways to communicate what your offer is and how you can solve a problem for a given customer. And so we treat healthcare as the United States, but it's not. It's really very focused on how individual markets are and the regulations or lack of them that are in that particular state. And so for purposes of this quick podcast, I want to prompt you to the idea that you can look at this and approach your market differently and with more intelligence. And you've heard me in previous episodes talk about the importance of having real healthcare intelligence and being able to speak to hospitals and health plan executives, large provider groups with very specific sorts of knowledge and tailoring your message to them. And state regulations and the variations that go from state to state can be very important and impactful. And it's a way to think outside the box. And it's also a way to differentiate yourself, because what's happening is every state Medicaid director, every chief medical officer, every healthcare exec really is getting clobbered, is getting pounded with solicitations and emails and AI cold email slop and the like. And so every sales deck is looking largely the same, with it's HIPAA compliant or it's AI empowered or whatever it is. And so it all looks the same. And when it starts to look the same, they start to ignore it and shut down. So if you can come in with a very specific message, and one example, a good example, is go in there understanding the geography, the specifics of the state, what their requirements are, and then positions that entity in a way that allows them to look at their business differently and take advantage of or accommodate those regulations more effectively. Now you're differentiating yourself. So this isn't a tactic. This is actually sales intelligence and market intelligence, and it can really differentiate yourself. So use that regulatory posture as a way to provide a richer, more meaningful, and more specific message that will resonate. So what do I mean by this specifically? If you think of the map, there are the two ends of this continuum. There are the heavily regulated states, and then there's the ones that are much more light touch, if you will. And on the heavy end, you can count on California, you can count on New York, you can oftentimes count on Texas, interestingly enough, Florida, Indiana, and so forth. And so as you look at your product or your solution and those states, can you communicate how you satisfy the regulatory requirements that those state insurance commissioners or the Medicaid departments there require, or other governing bodies? And then use that compliance angle as a way to accelerate your way into the count and into the conversation that's in ways that are meaningful. And that you can also use that as a way to kind of address objections before they even come up. That you can say that you're compliant. You can say, we've knocked this out of the park. We understand how this particular regulation affects you, and here's the advantages of our particular solution. On the side of the spectrum of the light touch states, those are typically states in the South: Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Idaho, and so forth. Those are much more regulatory friendly and much less restrictive. And in some cases, you can use that to your advantage. You can talk about it in terms of, hey, the regulations are light, which means you can move more quickly, you can get things in place, and you can prepare yourself from the day when those regulations do start to come into effect, when they have to elevate themselves to the other states around them. And, Nevada, particularly relatively lightweight in terms of light touch, but it's right next to California, and so it's likely to be influenced because of the border activity. So something to think about. Don't sell compliance necessarily, but sell the idea that you can move quickly. And at some point, you will have to accommodate these new regulations as they come out. So that's the way I would look at this. And if you want specific examples, you want to ping me, I can give you more specific examples. You can also Google this stuff and figure that out. But the practical takeaway for you, I think, is figure out create a grid or create a breakdown of where you fit relative to some of the regulations in your particular market. This is right up the alley for AI. AI, by the way, also being heavily regulated in certain states more than others. I think Indiana is one of those that's really kind of taken a particularly aggressive approach. And then create that grid, analyze it, and then start to customize your messaging specific to the regulations that that state is placing upon its health plans, its provider groups, its hospitals and health systems and the like. And you may very well find that you're the best solution provider for that state or the best positioned. And again, just to beat this to death, you're going to be able to craft a message that's much more likely to resonate because it does specifically address the things that they're running up against, when others are probably just coming at it with the same message that their marketing department has created for that specific product. So I hope this helps. I hope this gets you thinking, and there are other ways we'll talk about in the future that you can tackle markets in a different way and think a little bit outside the box. And it's one of the things I spend a lot of time doing with my client base, and because it's fun and because it does have a tendency to get the kind of traction that you need. Anyway, that's it for this quick episode. Thanks for listening to Let's Chat Health Tech, and we will be back next week with an interview. So thanks. Bye-bye.